On today's Academy lesson, we're going to go over two variants of the same double lift using the push-off technique, as well as a trick that you could use to practice the method. Now, when a magician hears the word push-off, it conjures up the images of David Blaine doing a push-off technique with no break and doing a move where you're just turning over two cards as one. Now, this particular technique does make use of a break. However, you are using the push-off to convey the illusion of singularity, which is very, very important when it comes to a double lift. So for this particular method, if you already know how to do a double lift, it's not going to be that much harder to get this. It's just going to be a little bit of a tweak that adds to that illusion of singularity. So without any further interruptions, the double lift looks like this, just like this. So you're showing a king of spades and then turning over the king of spades. And of course, that is the 8 of diamonds because we've done a double lift. The other variant of the move looks like this. So you're showing the king of spades, turning it over, and of course, in that action, you've changed it into the 8 of diamonds. Now, you notice what sets this move apart from the traditional double lift, which just looks like this, is that you are giving the push-off technique. So you are actually pushing off the card from the deck and using that to convey the illusion of singularity. Of course, this still being a double. Now let's go over the actual technique of that because this move still requires a break. Now there is a way of doing this move without doing a break, but that technique is way harder and less consistent. You really have to be advanced in order to know that move and to do it well under fire. But this particular way, you are still making use of a break and still allowing the move to take place. So let's get into the mechanics of the move. So first things first, you're going to need to get a break underneath the second card or whatever card you need to do a break under. Now, one of my favorite techniques is the dribble double, which just involves dribbling the cards and holding back 2, then replacing that on top of the deck, and that's what allows me to get my break underneath the second card of the deck. If the trick allows for it, you can more than simply just take the top card into the right hand, and as you're doing that, you could get a break in a number of ways in the left hand, sorry. And one way is this Harvey Rosenthal move, which is a very strong move to do. Let's just go over that briefly. For this move, what you're going to do is that you are going to put pressure with your forefinger and thumb on top of the deck. So notice the position of my forefinger is along the front edge of the deck and my thumb is resting on the upper left corner of the deck. Now what's going to happen is that my thumb is actually going to try and lift that card up. However, because of the pressure of my forefinger, what's going to happen is that only the lower right corner is going to lift up. So this is a great move to do because it doesn't seem like you're doing anything and yet you're still able to get a break on that card on top of the deck. So that's one way of doing it. You're more than welcome to also just push off the card briefly and pull it back, get a break that way if the trick calls for it again. But my favorite method is just holding back 2, bringing them together, and now you have a break. So now when you have a break underneath 2 cards, you're ready to do the technique. So because of that break, it's going to be very simple for your thumb to come in and just push off the top 2 cards. So what's going to happen is that you're going to put pressure on the edge up here. So you notice that it's nearing the upper left edge of the deck. You're going to put a little bit of pressure to separate those 2 cards from the break. So right now what's happening is that my thumb is putting pressure on those 2 cards. Now because of the break, you're going to notice that it's going to be very easy to just put a little bit of pressure and push off those cards as 1. So you're pushing out these 2 cards as 1. Now, initially when you do this move, you're going to notice that the cards are going to separate slightly. However, with practice, that's going to be something that's going to be eliminated from your doing this double lift. So once again, you have a break underneath the second card from the top of the deck. Whether you're using the dribble technique or using whatever technique you want to get a break, you're just getting a break there. You're going to put pressure with your thumb near the upper left corner, and you're going to push those 2 cards as 1. Now what's going to happen is that your right hand is going to come in and it's going to press against the right edge of these 2 cards. What that's going to do is that that's going to ensure that those 2 cards are square and together. Now another tip here is what's happening with my middle finger. So you notice my middle finger is coming here in the back and bracing the card underneath. So now there are a couple points of pressure here with this double lift. There's a pressure from this thumb, there's pressure from this finger down here, and there's also pressure from the fingertips grabbing this card over here in the right hand. So once you combine all those actions, what's happening is that you have a perfectly squared card. Now, the move itself at speed should just look like this, where you are pushing the card, and the illusion should be that you're just pushing a single card in the deck and turning it over. Now, once you get to this position, all that's going to happen is that you're going to bring this card all the way to the long right edge of the deck, and you're just going to allow gravity to come over and turn that card over as 1 on top of the deck. Now, once you're in this position, there are a couple different ways to regain the break and to do the double back over to turn the card face down. My favorite technique is known as the Altman trap. Now, the Altman trap is a very, very simple move to do, but it's a very, very hard move to get right and to do it consistently. So the Altman trap is just simply the action of trapping the card right there at the back by the flesh of the thumb. Now, we covered this in the double lift episode, but I'm just going to cover it here in a little bit of detail just to have the sake of completeness here. So one more time, let's just pretend that we've done the push off. We've come over here. Now, what's going to happen is that the Altman trap is going to take place as that card is getting coalesced with the deck. So as that card's getting coalesced with the deck, we're just putting a little bit of pressure with the base of the thumb. Now, what's going to happen there is that you notice that there's going to be a little bit of a gap there between the base of the thumb and the double and the rest of the deck. We're going to take advantage of that gap because this gap is going to allow us to put pressure on the upper left corner of the deck. When we put pressure with our thumb on the upper left corner of the deck, you're going to see what's going to happen here, assuming that I do get some lights on this particular move. You're going to be able to lift up this entire card above the deck. Very similar to the tilt. However, once we keep pressing with the thumb and release our fatty portion of the thumb base here, that break is going to transfer to the pinky and allow us to regain the break right there as we started. So one more time, you're trapping the card here. You're putting pressure with the thumb on the upper right corner. That's going to transfer the break to the pinky, and now you're ready to repeat the move. So in action, the move should just look like this. We're showing the Jack of Hearts, and of course, I've already obtained my break because of the Altman maneuver there. So turning over the move one more time, that's what the move should look like. So from the front, that's it. So in that action, we've obtained a break again underneath the card without any sort of separate action. Now, of course, using the push-off technique, it's the same exact thing. So we're just using the thumb to push off the card instead of just coming in and gripping the card. Now, the other technique is a little bit of a lift-off technique. So what this does is that if we lift up on the deck and let the rest of the deck fall, because there's a slight bevel on the cards, you're going to notice that this double is going to separate from the rest of the deck. Now, if we just do this, we're going to be able to lift up at the card here, and you notice that it's going to be very easy to just grab this card and pinch it at the right corner and turn it back face down. Now, this is, of course, a move that you're going to need to practice thoroughly, and it really depends on the actual condition of the deck, whether or not there's humidity or whether or not there's actual condensation or whether or not there's actually a bend on the cards, because you're going to notice sometimes the move's not going to hit depending on conditions. So a more reliable and consistent approach is the Altman trap technique. Now, the next technique is very similar. The only difference is that we are turning the card over end for end. So you notice that it's almost the exact same technique. The only difference is that we are angling the card. So instead of pushing the card straight, we're actually going to push the card at an angle. So because of the break, it's going to be very simple to just push off on these two cards at an angle. Now, of course, what's going to happen initially is a little bit of a separation. So this is a move that needs to be practiced very thoroughly. Now, once again, what's going to happen is that my thumb is going to hit the right edge of the cards here. And I'm going to use my middle finger and the base of my thumb to be able to turn these cards over. So I'm using the base of my thumb as a pivot point so that I can turn these two cards over, putting pressure to make sure the cards don't separate, and putting it on top of the deck. Now, the benefit of this method is that you could put the cards directly on top of the pinky break. You don't need to do any sort of Altman trap. You're just putting the cards directly on top of the pinky break. So you don't need to obtain a break in a weird or complicated fashion. So that move should just look like that. So it should just look like you're turning over this top card at an angle. Again, you're just bending the card at an angle and flipping it on top of the deck. That's it. And because of that break, it's very simple to grab those two cards as one each and every single time. So those are two different variations of the same double lift. And the benefit of this particular one over any other standard double lift is that you are given the illusion of singularity, which again is very, very important when doing a double lift. You want to make sure that you're conveying to the audience that you are turning over one card as opposed to maybe doing some fishy move. So here's a little bit of a quick trick that you could use to practice this particular technique or any other double lift. So for this, we're going to have a card picked. In this case, let's say it's the Joker. This card gets lost somewhere in the middle of the deck, never to be found ever again, cards flying everywhere. And we asked the spectator if they've ever seen the classic transposition trick where two people change places. Well, that's going to be my little bit of a warm-up. So don't forget the cards, sir, but it's going to be very important that you at least keep track of these two cards. So we have a king here and we have a queen here. So I want you to hold on to the king. Just pinch your fingers just like this, and the spectator's pinching the king here. I'm going to put that in my pocket briefly. And we ask the spectator to remember that they have the king and I have the queen. So if I do a little bit of a magical move just like this, if I have the king in my hand and those cards transpose, that means they have what in their hand? And of course, the spectator is going to say the queen. When the spectator turns over the card, they're going to find that they're holding the card that they picked in the beginning all the while. A little bit of a twist on the classic transposition trick. So this is a very, very simple trick to do. Doesn't require any sort of setup, and all it requires is just 2 double lifts and a control. So let's go over the actual trick right now. You're going to have the spectator pick any card. Let's say they pick the 8 of diamonds. You're going to control this card to the top of the deck in whatever way you want. My preferred technique is the Mahatma control. Of course, making as sloppy as possible to make sure that the spectator thinks that you are a goof. However, it's controlled chaos. Of course, their card is on top of the deck. Now you're going to get a break underneath the second card from the top of the deck in preparation for a double lift. And here you could do whichever technique you want. So if you want, you could do this particular technique as you show both of these cards and tell the spectator that in order to warm up, you're going to need to show them another trick. So here we have an 8 and here we have a 3. Of course, remember, this is a double with the spectator's card here. So we're showing an 8 and we're showing a 3. We're going to use this 8 to turn over that 3. And we're going to tell the spectator to remember the 8. Now here, of course, as we turn over the 3, we're getting a break underneath that card. So that when we turn this card over and give it to the spectator, telling them to pinch and not to move, you're actually giving them this card and you're preparing for another double lift. So the spectator's holding onto their card unbeknownst to them. And here you're ready for another double lift. So you say, so I'm holding the 3. But of course, if I do a little bit of a magic move, and here you're just going to come near the card that the spectator's holding. So the spectator's holding this card. You're just going to come near it and say, look, now I have the 8. But don't move, don't move. If I've successfully done this and I'm holding the 8, that means that you should be holding which card? And of course, the spectator is going to respond to 3, of which when they turn over the card, it's actually going to be an 8. Now, something that I have played around with this particular trick, one thing that I have played is telling the spectator not to move, showing the 8, and then saying, don't move. So if I had the 8, that means that you have which card, sir? You should have the 3, but I have the 3. I have the 3. So that means that you should have which card? You should have the 8. But wait, that doesn't make sense. Why don't you just turn your card over? And of course, the spectator turns their card over and it's their card. So it's a little bit of a fun thing you could play with, a little bit of a kickback on that transposition trick. And of course, all I'm doing there is just a color change. So I'm just doing this classic twirl color change that I covered in a different episode in the Academy. So those are a couple double lifts and a simple trick you could use to practice it. I hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you guys perform it. It is a very, very nice double lift because it allows for the illusion of singularity. Again, can't stress how important that is when you're doing a double lift to make it look natural, to make it look singular, so the spectators don't detect anything. So thank you guys for being part of the Academy. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope to see you guys on the next lesson.